Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Chris Hartman inherits his uncle's long-abandoned house, he expects peace. Instead, a ruthless HOA, led by a power-hungry woman, claims dominion over his land. But Chris has a past, a plan, and a very low tolerance for fabricated authority. The war for one home is about to begin. I arrived at the house well past 10. Under a sky so black it might as well have been painted. My tires crunched over the gravel of the private road, headlights slicing through the dust like a blade. The old Hartman place hadn't seen a soul in 12 years, but it was mine now, legally, officially, and with every recorded document in Sonoma County to back that up. The porch light was dead, but the key slid into the lock like it had been waiting for me. Inside, the air was musty, layered with a decade's worth of silence, but the bones of the house were solid. Heavy beams, thick windows, old wood that didn't creak so much as groan with memory. I didn't bother unpacking. I dropped my duffel by the front door, cracked a bottle of water, and crashed onto the couch, still wearing my boots. The knock hit the door like a battering ram at 5:34 in the goddamn morning. Not a polite rap. No hello neighbor kind of tap. No. This was the rhythm of someone with a badge, or at least someone who desperately wanted you to think they had one. I pulled on my jacket, cleared the sleep from my head, and opened the door. 3 figures stood on the porch. 2 men in tactical-looking uniforms, cheap canvas vests, security patches, baseball caps embroidered with something that looked vaguely official. Between them stood a woman in a tailored navy suit, bleach blonde hair, pearl necklace, tablet clutched like a weapon. "You are?" she asked before I could speak. "I live here," I said, glancing past her. Their SUV was parked sideways across my drive, lights still on. "You live here," she repeated, as if I'd said I was breeding velociraptors in the backyard. "This home has been unoccupied for over a decade, which changed last night. My name's Chris Hartman. This was my uncle's place. I inherited it. I've got the deed, the will, the transfer paperwork. Hell, I even have the key." The woman didn't so much as blink. "This property is within the bounds of Cypress Hollow. You can't just show up and occupy it. There are procedures, board approval, compliance reviews." "Cypress Hollow?" I repeated, confused. "This place isn't in any HOA. I checked that before I even set foot in the county." She smiled tightly, as if I'd just flunked a test I didn't know I was taking. "As of 2019, any property accessing Cypress Hollow's shared roadways is subject to our oversight. You entered through the north cul-de-sac. That's a controlled access easement. And you are Karen Mills," she said, with the confidence of someone used to snapping fingers and watching people jump. "President of the Cypress Hollow Homeowners Association. These are my security officers. We were alerted to movement on this property and came to investigate. You are in violation of Section 8, Subsection 11 of the Cypress Hollow Code of Conduct." I stared at her for a long moment. "You showed up on my doorstep at dawn with 2 fake cops to tell me I need a hall pass to walk into my own house." "Sir," she said, a finger twitching near her tablet, "this is not about you. It's about community safety and compliance. An abandoned property reoccupied without HOA oversight represents a potential threat to neighborhood standards." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This place isn't part of your little fantasy land. It predates your subdivision by 60 years. My uncle refused every offer to annex it. I saw the letters myself." She held up the tablet. "According to our records, the board voted unanimously in 2019 to include this parcel. That vote was certified and enacted. As such, we consider this a matter of jurisdiction." I narrowed my eyes. "You consider it? That's not how law works." The shorter of the 2 men took a step forward, like I'd said something threatening. I held up both hands slowly. "Easy there, muscle. You lay a finger on me, and I'll make sure the local sheriff knows you're impersonating law enforcement." "No one is impersonating anything," Karen snapped. "This is a civil matter. I'm giving you a courtesy notification that the board will be issuing a notice of removal. If you do not vacate the premises within 72 hours, further action will be taken." "By who?" "Your knitting club." Her eyes flashed. "By the enforcement arm of Cypress Hollow." I took a breath, then another, until I could feel the rhythm of my pulse slow back to normal. "Okay, you've made your point. Now get off my property." "Expect an official citation within 24 hours, she said, turning sharply. Her guards followed, one of them glancing back over his shoulder like he expected me to pull a shotgun. They climbed into the SUV and rolled off, slow and smug. I stood there barefoot on the porch, the sky just starting to lighten. When I turned to go back inside, I saw a paper had already been taped to the glass. Not a legal notice, not from the county or court, just a sheet of HOA letterhead with big, bold text. Notice of non-compliance, immediate removal required under Cypress Hollow Code, FARA 8.11. I tore it down and stuffed it in my pocket. By 9 a.m., I was already on the phone with Sheriff Mendez. By the time I finished explaining everything to Sheriff Mendez, he'd already started swearing. Not at me, at them. We'd worked together years ago on a joint task force targeting logistics corruption out of Alameda, and I trusted him like I trusted my own trigger finger. If there was one man in the county who didn't give a damn about petty suburban fiefdoms or women named Karen with too much time and not enough law school, it was him. "Chris," he said, voice low and gravelly, "you're not in Cypress Hollow. That line ends a good 200 yards from your porch. Always has. You've got your own parcel ID, your own plat map, and there's never been any approved annexation request on file. Hell, the board would have to submit it to the County Planning Commission, hold hearings, notify adjacent landowners. Did you ever get a letter?" "Not a damn thing." He chuckled dryly. "Then they're either bluffing or stupid. Possibly both." He agreed to send someone by to file a statement and confirm jurisdictional boundaries. Meanwhile, I drove out to the county registrar's office in Santa Rosa and asked for everything they had on the property: maps, easement diagrams, annexation records, court filings. The woman behind the counter was efficient, and by noon, I had a full packet printed out, including a 2007 court ruling confirming my uncle's refusal to join any association. The HOA had tried it back then, too. He'd fought them off with a lawyer and a vengeance. I guess that part runs in the family. By the time I got back to the house, I could already feel the temperature had changed. Literally. On my gate, which I'll remind you is about 50 yards from the first house in Cypress Hollow, someone had posted a bright orange laminated sign: "Private road, HOA access only, non-members will be prosecuted." Next to it was a cheaply welded metal post, and behind that, a collapsible gate, chained shut, padlocked, no key, no code, no notice. Just a big concrete screw you right in my driveway. I parked, walked the rest of the way up to the house, and called Mendez again. His deputy rolled in 20 minutes later, looked at the sign, whistled, and muttered, "They're really pushing their luck." He helped me cut the chain, photograph everything, and we filed it as unauthorized obstruction of access on private property. He even left a printed warning in a plastic sleeve taped to the same post: "Unlawful barricade under investigation." But I wasn't done. I wanted to know what exactly these people were telling themselves to justify this. So I put on clean boots, grabbed my folder of documents, and walked 2 streets over into Cypress Hollow toward the HOA's community office, which was nothing more than a trailer with vinyl siding parked next to their community center. Inside, the air was thick with cheap carpet cleaner and scented candles. A middle-aged woman with too much lipstick and a Bluetooth headset looked up like I was a Martian. "I need to speak with your board president." She hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" "Not yet, but she knows who I am." Within a minute, Karen Mills emerged from a side door holding a mug that said HOA, keeping standards high. "Mr. Hartman," she said, with mock surprise. "What brings you here?" I opened the folder on the reception desk. "This is my deed. This is the court ruling from 2007. This is the county map showing that I am not, and have never been, part of Cypress Hollow. This?" I tapped the laminated sign photo. "This is illegal." She didn't even look at the pages. "Mr. Hartman," she said smoothly, "the board of directors voted unanimously in 2019 to include your parcel in the jurisdiction of Cypress Hollow under Article 16 of the revised charter. That vote was submitted to our records and is fully enforceable within the bounds of the community. There's no record of that vote with the county. We do not require external validation for internal governance decisions." I blinked. "You do when they involve someone else's land." She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "The board also voted to reclassify the access road as a protected corridor. That vote passed, and as your home connects through that corridor, it becomes subject to community restrictions. You have 72 hours to file your appeal. Appeal to what? To the board, naturally. I let the silence stretch long enough to be awkward. Then I said, "You people are playing with fire." "On the contrary," she said, sipping her coffee, "we are protecting community integrity." That night, I installed 4 security cameras around the house, solar-powered, high-resolution, with motion alerts sent to my phone. I drilled them into the porch, the eaves, the gate, the trees near the fence line. At 2:43 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Camera 2. Movement detected. 3 figures. Hooded. No uniforms. One of them taped something to my front door and ran off. When I opened it in the morning, it was a new notice. Final warning. You are in violation of code fire rate 11. Immediate evacuation required. HOA action pending. This time, I didn't just stuff it in my pocket. I called Mendez. And then I called my lawyer. I went to sleep with my head full of old timber and the smell of dust, and woke up to a gate. Not figuratively, an actual gate, steel and spite welded together and bolted into the dirt about 100 yards down the private drive, complete with a keypad and a security booth the color of beige regret. A man in a reflective vest blinked at me from behind a plexiglass window as if I were the intruder in my own life. He had a plastic badge, the kind you buy in bulk, and a walkie-talkie that crackled like a dying radio. A collapsible arm blocked the road. Beneath it, someone had chained a second smaller gate with a padlock so new it gleamed. Beside the post, bolted to a concrete footing, a sign read, "Access restricted, Cypress Hollow residents and authorized personnel only." I walked up to the booth, folder tucked under my arm, and smiled with the politeness of a man who once had to read people for a living. The guy peered at the paperwork like he could judge acreage through paper. "You can't pass," he said, matter of fact. "You need an RFID to open the gate." "I don't need quarter-inch plastic to open a road on my land," I said. "Who authorized this?" He flipped through a small journal as if the act of reading provided legitimacy. "Board Order 2019, chains installed by Community Security. You gotta call the board." I flashed the sheriff's warning on my phone and the county docket numbers I'd pulled earlier. He didn't read them. He was paid to follow orders, not to question paperwork. So I tried a different tactic. I walked the perimeter, heads down, boots following wheel ruts where my truck had passed the night before, and found the easement marker, a weathered metal pin in the ground that used to mark the legal line between properties. The pin was there, true to its place. The new concrete footing sat half a foot farther in, astride the pin like a boot on a throat. Whoever put the gate in had ignored the survey peg altogether. That was a mistake amateurs make when they want a thing to feel permanent, without the inconvenience of law. Back inside, I spread out the maps on the dining table and began to compare. County plat from 2007, clear as a bell, my parcel clearly delineated, an island of private land separated from the submitted plats of Cypress Hollow. Then there was a glossy copy I'd found in the HOA office earlier that Karen had waved like gospel. A map stamped 2019 with a bold red line reclassifying the access road and, conveniently, including my parcel within the dotted boundary of Cypress Hollow. At first glance, it was neat, tidy, the kind of thing someone submits when they want the paperwork to sing. But when you've stared at documents for a living, you learn to hear the lies in the margins. The font on the 2019 stamp didn't match the other county stamps I'd seen. The ink density varied. The signatures were suspiciously identical in slope and flourish, as if traced from the same hand and copied. More tellingly, the metadata on the scanned file had been scrubbed, saved under a month that matched the HOA meeting date, but with a file creation timestamp that was far too considerate for a chaotic community process. Little things, but they add up when you know where to look. I ran my finger along the line where the new boundary ate into my property and felt the texture of ink versus toner, paper that had been reprinted, cut, and pasted like a ransom note. I called the county surveyor, a no-nonsense woman named Alvarez, and said, "Meet me at the pin." She arrived 10 minutes later in a truck with a sticker from the county survey department and a toolbox of instruments that looked like they belonged on a spacecraft. We walked the line together. She ran a quick check with a handheld GPS and frowned in a way that says someone's about to have a bad day. "This gate is about a half a meter on his property," she said. "If they wanted to do this properly, they'd have to file an easement modification with us. There's nothing on record. No petition, no notice. Nothing." Can someone have submitted an internal HOA map and filed it somewhere we can't see? I asked. Alvarez shook her head. Not without county filing. People don't get to redraw parcels with a stapler and a meeting. The man in the booth watched us argue with the kind of attention reserved for people waiting for lunch. When I turned back, he had a man with a clipboard beside him, a middle-aged type who leaned on the arm of his jacket like he carried gravitas in his sleeves. He tapped his badge, which read, Community Security with Cypress Hollow, then tapped the chain as if proving the physicality of his authority. You folks can't be here without authorization, he intoned. I own this property, I said. There's a court order from 2007 that proves it. We're documenting this obstruction. You're obstructing private access. He coughed, a small sound of practiced discomfort. We've issued notices. Notices taped to my door by hooded figures at 3 in the morning are not the same as due process, I said. Who contracted you? He smiled like a man who never considered consequences. The community board. Name names, I said. He hesitated, then said, You know who, which translated in plausible people language to Karen Mills. I walked back to the house with Alvarez and my maps, and for the first time since I'd inherited the place, a little of my calm frayed, not because of the gate, because of the brazenness of it. Rolling a steel barricade across a private drive and chaining it to a footing planted into someone else's survey peg takes imagination, nerve, and a belief that paperwork can be made to bend under will. That belief is the kind that corrodes community and invites people to do dangerous things. I did the sensible thing. I photographed everything, filed an online complaint with the county against unauthorized land obstruction, and left a written demand taped to the gate. Legal language, plain language, authority, and consequence laid out like a shovel. The deputy I'd spoken with earlier said they would expedite the case. He warned me, though, that until a court ordered a removal, the gate might stay. Civil process, he called it. Paper shuffles slow and steady. So I shifted tactics. If they wanted to play documents, I'd make another stack. I drove into town, to the records office, to the library, to the old county clerk who remembered my uncle and his refusal to bow. I photocopied deeds, scanned microfilm of 2007 hearing transcripts, pulled the tax rolls, and found tucked in a bland folder labeled Community Archives a copy of the 2019 vote that Karen had brandished at me. It was a collage of signatures and checkmarks, and a line that claimed unanimous approval. One signature bore the same name as a neighbor who, according to the cemetery ledger in the hall the clerk pointed me to, had died 2 years prior. Another name belonged to someone who lived on the other side of town and swore he had been out of the country at the time. That was not a clerical oversight. It was a cartographer's crime. I took the photocopy, the GPS readings, the county statements, and a battered cup of coffee back to the house and sat down at the dining table, the maps arranged like an accusing constellation. The gate sat out there, all swagger and hinges, and though it blocked a road, it couldn't block people's eyes when the truth was laid out in ink and measurement. The question was, who had the resources and the audacity to build a paper kingdom and try to plant it over someone else's home? It felt personal, but I reminded myself that it wasn't about me. It was about precedent. People like Karen stack small usurps until law itself looks like optional furniture, and I had, whether I liked it or not, been handed the family role of objecting. That night, I set the cameras to catch people approaching the gate, not just my door, and left the house with a sense of a plan, less a blueprint than a long list of things I could prove if only I kept looking, pulling and asking until somebody, somewhere, said the obvious thing out loud. How did a private association decide to annex a man's land with nothing but a finger in the wind? The water stopped on a Tuesday. Not a drip, not a gurgle, just the kind of clean silence that makes your skin crawl when you're brushing your teeth and realize the sink's gone mute. I stood there staring at the faucet for a long second, then flipped the handle back and forth like it might come alive out of guilt. Nothing, not even a rattle in the pipes. The tank in the toilet refilled halfway, then gave up. I opened the utility hatch outside and traced the main line back to where it met the connection point near the edge of the property, the part that ran parallel to the Cypress Hollow pump station. A small pink flag had been staked into the ground with a plastic tag. Unauthorized tap. Service terminated pending review. Behind it, the pipe had been cut, not clamped, not capped, sliced, clean through with what looked like a rotary saw. The end had been zip-tied with a bright orange tag from the HOA, bearing the same cursed number as always, code for 811. I stood there holding the tag like it might bite me. It didn't matter that my water bill came from the county, or that the infrastructure technically fell under shared jurisdiction. Someone had decided they didn't like me using a pipe that passed under their fiefdom, so they turned off the tap. It didn't stop there. That afternoon, I got an email from the United States Postal Service, a notice of address change confirmation. Apparently, I had requested to redirect all my mail to a P.O. box registered under the name Cypress Hollow Community Services. I hadn't. I'd never submitted a form. I hadn't touched a damn thing. I drove straight to the post office in town. The clerk behind the glass looked mildly bored until I showed him my ID and explained the situation. He typed something into the terminal, frowned, then picked up a yellow form from under the desk. Looks like a manual change request was submitted in person last Friday, signed too. He held up the form. The signature was a shaky approximation of my name in block letters, almost like someone wasn't used to forging. Did they show ID? I asked. He shrugged. They had a letter from the HOA stating they were your designated community agent, said the house was undergoing transfer of occupancy. It didn't raise red flags. These HOA types do this kind of thing all the time with rentals. I took the form and scanned it into my phone, then asked the clerk to restore my mail to its original route immediately. He did with an apologetic nod. We'll flag the box. Anything addressed to you that goes there gets sent back. Back at the house, I found a new violation notice zip-tied to my mailbox post. Exterior lighting non-compliant, excessive lumens after 10 p.m. I hadn't even turned on the floodlight since Sunday. 3 more flyers were taped to my door, one about unapproved facade coloration, one citing excessive vegetation near the driveway, wildflowers, and one warning of impending administrative review by the Cypress Hollow Architectural Committee. I had no idea such a committee existed, probably just Karen and a mirror. They were escalating, so I did too. I spent that night digging, not metaphorically, literally. I laid a shallow trench behind the house, away from the main line, and spent the next day installing a small above-ground water tank I'd purchased from a farm supply store in Petaluma. It wasn't huge, but it would last until the legal side caught up. I hooked it to a gravity-fed filter system I'd used on assignments overseas. Not pretty, but effective. I also ordered a backup solar array and battery bank, just in case someone got brave enough to start playing with the power lines. I logged each incident in a spreadsheet. Dates, times, photos, copies of mailers, even audio recordings where I could get them. I started using my GoPro whenever I left the house, clipped to the dash. I didn't care if it made me look paranoid. The number of things that had happened coincidentally since my arrival was growing at a rate that would have made a conspiracy theorist blush. The final straw that week came when I caught a man with an HOA branded vest standing at the edge of my property with a tape measure and a clipboard, jotting down notes while pointing at my porch. When I confronted him, he smiled like a mall Santa and said, "Routine inspection." "For what?" I asked. "Community conformity, structure encroachment, fence alignment, that sort of thing." I pointed to the camera bolted under the eave. "This isn't your jurisdiction." "Well," he said, flipping to the next page, "there's some debate about that." "There isn't," I said, "and if you step 1 foot past that fence line again, I'll have you trespassed by the county." He raised both hands like I'd threatened to shoot him, then backed away toward his truck. It had no license plates. That night, I compiled everything into a flash drive and delivered it in person to my lawyer, Caroline Brandt. She was younger than I expected, early 30s, sharp eyes, ex-ADA, with a handshake like she'd already won. We sat down in her office, and I laid out the stack: forged mail redirection, water sabotage, unauthorized entry, surveillance, HOA-issued citations with no basis in law, and now structural harassment. She didn't blink. We sue. I figured. Civil harassment, property interference, administrative fraud, possible criminal charges for mail tampering and utility sabotage. And if we dig into their tax filings and vendor contracts, there's a good chance we find procurement fraud, especially if they're using in-house vendors. In-house, she smiled. Most of these overreaching HOAs have a pattern. Board president's husband runs the landscaping company. Brother-in-law does architectural review. Nephew runs a private security firm. It's incestuous. I nodded slowly. Karen's husband owns a contracting firm, saw the logo on a maintenance van parked at the gate. She tapped her keyboard and began pulling records. Let's start digging. If they want to play hardball, we'll bury them in their own bylaws. By the end of the meeting, we'd filed the first motion, a cease and desist against any further HOA communication with county services on my behalf. Step 1. It was small, but it was the beginning of the paper trail that would take this circus to court. And by that point, I was ready to drag every last laminated sign and fake ordinance in front of a judge. By Thursday morning, I had another surprise. 2 uniformed HOA officers standing outside my gate, arms crossed, flanking a white SUV with a magnetic seal. Cypress Hollow Community Safety Division. They weren't police, but they sure wanted to look like it. Tan tactical pants, radios clipped to their shoulders, plastic badges hanging from their necks. One of them was holding a clipboard. I opened the gate slowly, not stepping past the property line. "Can I help you?" The taller one squinted at me, then held up the clipboard. "We're here to deliver a notice of eviction for violation of community safety standards. You're being ordered to vacate this property within 48 hours. I blinked. Eviction? Under whose authority? Cypress Hollow HOA Board of Governance, he said, like that meant something in the real world. Failure to comply will result in enforcement actions. You do realize I'm not under your HOA. I have county-certified maps, court rulings, a deed, and, most importantly, jurisdictional autonomy. They didn't even flinch. The other guy stepped forward, unfolding a laminated sheet. Per Cypress Hollow Resolution 1908, any structure connected to shared access roads must comply with safety integration mandates. That resolution is meaningless to me, I said, stepping back toward my porch. And if either of you cross this fence line again, I'll consider it attempted trespass and detainment. Their eyes narrowed. The taller one shifted, like he wanted to test me. Instead, he stuck the clipboard under the gate latch and backed away. You've been officially notified. I left the notice untouched and called Sheriff Ortega. He arrived within 20 minutes. I handed him the laminated sheet, the forged eviction notice, and showed him the camera footage of the officers arriving. "These aren't law enforcement," he said flatly. "Nope." He glanced over the SUV, then raised his voice. "Step out of the vehicle. Now." The HOA men hesitated, then reluctantly complied. Their IDs were bogus. Laminated name tags with no state seal, no department. The SUV was unregistered, leased under a property management firm that Karen had ties to. Ortega made 2 calls. Within the hour, both men were in cuffs, and a formal investigation into HOA impersonation of law enforcement was opened. But Karen wasn't done. That evening, a contractor truck rolled up and began unloading metal poles and wiring just before the main road curve. I watched as a small team installed a gate across the access road leading to my property, complete with keypad, motion sensors, and a camera mounted on a pole. It was a checkpoint, cutting me off from the county road. The sign read, "Private access, residents only, HOA enforced." I documented everything. Then I called Caroline. "We've got false imprisonment attempts, illegal gate installation, and unauthorized restriction of access to a county-recognized property." She replied without missing a beat. "It's time to go nuclear. Injunction incoming." By Friday afternoon, a temporary restraining order had been filed against Cypress Hollow HOA, citing unlawful obstruction of access, impersonation of public officers, and attempted eviction without jurisdiction. Caroline moved fast. She even secured a court order demanding the immediate removal of the unauthorized gate. I thought it was over. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to no water pressure, not a drip. I checked the kitchen faucet, the bathroom, the outside hose. Nothing. My backup cistern tank in the shed? Bone dry. That didn't make sense unless someone had actively shut off or diverted the source. I traced the line toward the shared pumping station down the slope, just past the old service trail. I knew my property shared a connection to the groundwater pump with some adjacent homes, but my pipe had been grandfathered in long before the HOA even existed. When I reached the clearing, I found the answer: a brand new lock on the pump access box, and a laminated sign taped to the side. Unauthorized tap detected, water supply disabled per HOA bylaws section 6.14. I laughed. Then I took photos. After I got back to the house, I noticed a red envelope taped to my front door. Inside, a printed list of community violations, including unauthorized dwelling, non-compliant exterior paint tone, and, my favorite, excessive nighttime lighting. The irony was rich, considering I'd installed motion lights after the HOA goons showed up pretending to be police. Even more disturbing, I stopped receiving mail. I drove down to the post office and was told my address had been temporarily redirected due to a requested forwarding change. The clerk showed me the printout, forwarded to a P.O. box in Cypress Hollow's main clubhouse. I nearly broke the counter. I filed an immediate fraud claim with USPS and had the box flagged. The clerk apologized profusely. This kind of thing usually only happens with identity theft or shady HOA nonsense, he muttered. By Sunday, I'd had enough. I installed new external solar-powered cameras, rerouted my entire plumbing to a portable water tank delivery system, and covered the gate with a printed vinyl banner that read, "Private property not under HOA jurisdiction, trespassers will be prosecuted." Then I filed a second complaint, this time not just civil. I sent a full case packet to the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office: water sabotage, mail fraud, identity misrepresentation, illegal obstruction. Caroline added fuel to the fire by submitting a motion for an emergency hearing. We were gathering momentum, and I knew Karen felt the pressure, but pressure makes people desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Tuesday morning began with static on my radio scanner and a flicker on the security feed. The driveway camera picked up movement. Two men in matching dark polos walking up with purposeful strides, holding what looked like documents and some kind of portable scanner. Their shirts bore the Cypress Hollow logo, but instead of security, the embroidery now read Code Enforcement Division. New title, same amateur theater. I stayed inside and waited. One of them rang the bell, the other paced near my window. I opened the door halfway, phone in one hand, filming. "We're here to serve an official evacuation notice," the first one said, holding out a stapled packet of papers. "Per Emergency Community Safety Code, enacted by Board Directive, this property must be vacated immediately due to structural violations and risk of fire hazard." I didn't blink. "You're impersonating county code enforcement. Again, that's a felony." "Sir, we've been authorized." "No, you haven't. You're trespassing, and I've got it all on video." I didn't need to say more. I hit the panic button mounted just inside the door frame, linked directly to Ortega's office. The same one we'd used back in Homeland days when things got ugly. Within minutes, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Ortega stepped out himself. It was like watching a bad high school play get rated mid-performance. The two code officers tried to act official, fumbling through their printouts as Ortega walked up and calmly asked for their credentials. One of them mumbled something about a community directive. Ortega took the packet, read the header, and turned slowly toward me. "You want to press charges?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Unlawful detainment attempt, criminal impersonation, and trespass." He nodded, hand already on his cuffs. As the deputies loaded them into the cruiser, I followed Ortega back to the gate. He took one look at the keypad, shook his head, and radioed for county code compliance to evaluate the illegal structure. That same afternoon, the formal arrest warrant was issued for Karen Mills. Charges included criminal impersonation of public officers, fraudulent modification of mail records, obstruction of private access road, sabotage of private utilities, attempted unlawful eviction, forgery of official planning maps, conspiracy to defraud property rights. She was picked up at a luncheon she hosted at the HOA clubhouse. According to the deputy who called me later, she protested loudly and declared, "I am the law here." I wish I could have seen it, but it didn't end there. A forensics team from the DA's office was dispatched to examine the clubhouse's records, digital storage, HOA vote logs, internal messaging. Turns out, the 2019 community vote to annex my property had never reached quorum, and several names on the list of approving neighbors were confirmed to be dead, moved away, or never existed. The smoking gun. The architectural plans showing my parcel as under HOA jurisdiction had been drafted by an LLC registered to Karen's husband and dated 3 months before the fake vote even happened. Karen didn't just make a power grab, she engineered it like a hostile corporate takeover, and I wasn't the only target. The trial was open to the public. The courtroom buzzed with whispers and cell phone flashes the moment Karen Mills was let in, still in a cream blazer, now wrinkled and a few shades less smug. Behind her trailed 3 other board members, nervous, pale, and clearly regretting every HOA meeting they'd ever attended. Caroline was flawless. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence like she was back giving a national security briefing. First came the aerial cadastral maps, layered over time, showing my property's boundary had never changed. Then came the HOA meeting minutes, doctored timestamps, false signatures, fake votes. One witness testified under oath that Karen pressured him into voting to annex the parcel in exchange for a landscaping discount. We presented the USPS fraud report showing Karen had filed the mail redirect herself, listing her own HOA box as the destination. Surveillance footage showed the 2 fake officers entering my property without cause. The kicker, an email retrieved from the HOA's internal archive. Karen writing to the board, "If we move fast on the Hartman place, no one will question us. No one lives there. Yet." That word, yet, hung in the room like smoke. The prosecution laid it out plain. Karen orchestrated a campaign of document tampering, impersonation, infrastructure sabotage, and mail fraud with the intent to steal legal possession of property she had no claim to. It was over in 6 days. The jury took less than 3 hours. Karen was sentenced to 14 years in state prison for fraud, criminal impersonation, forgery, and attempted illegal eviction. Her co-conspirators received between 4 and 8 years each, with personal fines exceeding $250,000. As for the HOA itself, the judge declared it a non-compliant corporate entity due to systemic abuse of power and ordered its immediate dissolution. The gate, the cameras, the patrols, all removed by county order within 72 hours. Cypress Hollow ceased to exist. A month later, I received a check for $780,000, a court-ordered settlement covering damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. It won't bring back time, but it bought me the peace to rebuild. I repainted the house, repaired the fence, restored the water lines, planted a new oak out front where the old one had died during the HOA's blockade. A friend helped me install a sturdy wooden sign by the private road. It reads, "Private drive, not under HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be prosecuted." And just beneath it, smaller text, "We recommend you knock first." Sometimes, on cool evenings, I sit on the porch with a coffee and watch the cars slow down as they reach the edge of where Cypress Hollow used to be. Some of them stop, some don't, but none of them knock.